Hi, this is Mark Arnold, and welcome to season 6 and another Fun Ideas podcast. And to open this new season, I have a brand new guest that wants to talk Disney with me. So, fortunately, I've written a book, so I have a little bit of knowledge. And today's special guest is named Phil Smith. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Hello from Las Vegas, Nevada.
Well, hello from Springfield, Oregon. That's where I am at. So, uh, so, um, you consulted me, and I assume because you held up before we started the same book that I held up, Frozen Ice, so you're aware of my Walt Disney Productions book.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about yourself and just like how you got into Disney and that type of background.
Absolutely. As a very, very young infant, my mother used to every Friday take me to a local video store in Wilmington, Delaware. Friday was always known as movie day. And she would usually rent out 2 videos for me to watch. And it was getting to a point where she wanted to kind of get some new ideas for good children's movies. And so she asked the clerk, where do you keep the kids section? And she threw out some suggestions that she thought my mom would like the Muppets, the Peanuts, Charlie Brown specials. But apparently I had other ideas, as my mom always told the story as she was pushing me in the stroller. She was looking at all these other suggested videos when suddenly my eyes actually caught an image of this funny looking car with people hanging out of it. And I started to actually reach for the video and I couldn't reach it. So I started to actually stand up in the stroller to try and reach for it. And before I fell, my mom quickly pushed me back down. I was like, what are you trying to get? And she, whipped out the video. She's like, what is this? The Love Bug?
No, you don't want that.
She was like, why would you even? And then she reads the description and she's like, well, okay, maybe let's give it a shot. So she takes it up to the cashier and, she says, okay, so, this is one movie. And back then that was in the days of one movie you could only rent for one day or one night. Right. So I watched this film from my crib, just eyes glued to the set. And I never stopped watching it and I loved it. I remember my mom said it was hopping up and down in the crib a lot. So she took it back the next day and the cashier told her, there's 3 other Herbie movies if you're interested. So my mom rented all the remaining titles and same reaction, just as a kid. And I was just, glued there. So from there, that pretty much, generated the entire, I guess, Robert Stevenson collection of the Absent-Minded Professor, the right. Shaggy Dog, which I have actually autographed DVD from Tim Considine and Tommy Kirk.
Oh.
And one of my personal favorites, Blackbeard's Ghost. Hey. All these films, I just was watching so much as a kid. It got to a point where my mom was like, as I got older, there's new films coming out now. Like, wouldn't you like to check this film out? It's called The Goonies. It's got kids and pirates and adventure. And I was like, nope, I want to rent the Herbie movies again.
Wow.
And I pretty much have been just a dedicated live action Disney film fan ever since. And as you can see with the shirt as well, the Buena Vista Film Distribution, that's the logo that appeared before just about every live action Disney film, starting as early as 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And I love them. I can't get enough of them. I will rewatch them constantly. And, I collect merchandise from the films, from lobby cards to press books to original movie posters. I've even got some original scripts, if you can believe that. And, I've been fortunate to meet some of these stars over the years through conventions or expos they've attended. And I just love reading up on them, especially, when I found out about your book, I said, this is, as you kind of put it, a great continuation from Leonard Maltin's The Disney Films, because I had thought, no one's ever really explored that territory post Walt's death.
Yeah.
And what you did, I remember looking at this had to have been about 2018, 2019. I was just researching other Disney books that had been written about those films, and yours popped up. And I thought, this sounds exactly what I'm looking for, and just ate it right up. It's a superbly written book, and it's my go-to source for reading those little bits of trivia that I might have missed the first time around.
Now, how, if you didn't like the Goonies, I mean, How current do you go on your Disney film fandom, or do you stop about the time my book stops?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that one up because, one of my personal favorites of the early 80s, believe it or not, is this one, Condor Man.
Oh, yeah.
And, that was another one I read it a lot as a kid. And around the time of The Goonies, another personal favorite of mine, the movie Flight of the Navigator.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty good.
But I'd say, the real peak for me was actually pre-Disney Renaissance, because one of my all-time favorite early 90s Disney films, Dick Tracy.
Okay.
And again, as someone who really didn't, grow up on the Goonies or like, Indiana Jones or, all these big adventure films of the 80s they kept pushing out for kids, I just, I wanted to keep going with the Disney stuff. And really, I guess, my mom was a big proponent of, why don't you see some of the newer things? I heard they're really good and they've got some actors that are really good at the voices. Like I remember we went and saw Aladdin, the animated one with Robin Williams in the theater twice. And that kind of really started my love for Robin Williams. But I think I kind of stopped watching the stuff that came out in theaters probably in the early 2000s, because at that point I felt like, well, it's either a musical or a sports movie. That's kind of the way that Disney did it a lot, and then I remember one of the very last sports films they did was with The Rock, and I think it was called The Game Plan, where he's a football player who discovers he has a daughter he didn't know about. Yeah. And it's like they're really scraping the bottom of the barrel at this point.
Yeah, it seems like now the two things they do besides their cartoons and stuff, which we can talk about, but as far as live action goes, is they'll do live action versions of rides. Like I think the recent one is Jungle Cruise with The Rock, and then just remakes of their animated films. So there's a live action Dumbo, a live action Lady and the Tramp,
live action
this, that, and I think Pinocchio's the next one. So,
which ironically is my favorite animated Disney film.
Right.
I saw that with my mom in the theater at a 1992 re-release they did that summer.
So I can understand if you're not a big fan of current Disney, for that reason. Although I do have a soft spot still for the Disney and Pixar animated films, and I still collect those. The live action ones, yeah, I gave up on years ago. It's like I wouldn't say necessarily that the end of my book is the end of my interest, because I mean they did a few later on, like the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids series. I think is decent and things like that. So, but over time, it's been like diminishing returns for my interest.
I think they realized they were no longer making money, and they realized, as I've often said, well, Disney's philosophy seemed to be, if you can't beat them, buy them, which is pretty much what they did with Star Wars.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate. I don't know. Do you have Disney Plus?
I do.
Yeah. I'm sure that you're not the only fan that's like, okay, they put out a brand new Star Wars series, brand new Muppets movie, a brand new National Geographic special or 10.
Here I am waiting for Son of Flubber.
Like, Disney stuff like, I know you mentioned Love Bug. All the Love Bugs are on there except for maybe the TV movie version that came out in the 90s,
Yeah, with Bruce Campbell.
MIA, but I liked that one too.
I did too. I watched it in its first broadcast on the Wonderful World of Disney, November 30th, 1997. I remember the actual air date.
So it is a frustrating thing for us Disney Plus fans. Yes, they do good stuff like bringing the Beatles Get Back, but it's like I always tell my wife who bought me the channel for me, she says, I know you like Disney, I'm buying this for you. And I said, in recent times, if you wanted to cancel it, it's all right. And she says, well, it's all wrapped up in Hulu and all this other bundled stuff, so we're not canceling it. So I said, all right. And so, I continue watching like, the newer Pixar films and the newer Marvel films, but I'm like, what happened to the classic Disney stuff? They don't have to put everything up, but certainly, like, I think the last classic Disney thing they put up of any age was probably The Happiest Millionaire. Over a year ago. So,
in its roadshow version.
Yeah, which was nice, and I go, oh, good. It's like, but can you put up something else? Like I don't even care if they put up like crap, like The Misadventures of Merlin Jones or something like that, or The Monkey's Uncle, which would be fun, the sequel,
I miss Never a Dull Moment with Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah. And so, I don't care if they put the bad ones up. I just want to see something a little more vintage than say 1980. It's
Yeah.
like, they don't have to put up all the cartoons. I know some are politically incorrect, blah, 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 blah. But they certainly could put up more stuff than they have,
It's
from their
weird that
archives.
they actually I thought it was crazy when they had released the video in 2019 of all the stuff they were putting out for the first wave, and they mentioned the sequels to the movie The Brave Little Toaster.
Yeah,
They didn't include the original film.
right. Which I think is on there now, but yeah, I remember that too. It's like there
Yeah.
was odd choices in certain respects, and I'm like, well,
Yeah,
this is
you'll split a trilogy with just the first and third film, like the Dexter Rileys. They don't
yeah,
have
that's
Now You
one.
See 'Em, Now You Don't.
I don't understand the story on that one because it's also not on Blu-ray on the Disney Movie Club since he's held up some of those Blu-rays, which are only available through that.
I actually
Uh,
have a theory for that.
okay,
I have
go ahead,
a bit of a
and then I'll tell
theory.
you my theory too.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My theory, believe it or not, and I'll tie this in with another classic that isn't on Disney Plus, Ed Begley Jr. The reason I
Hmm.
say Ed Begley Jr. is because he has a very small role, minor role in Now You See Him, Now You Don't, but he has a speaking role. And he also has a minor speaking role in an older film that Disney did from the 70s called Charlie and the Angel with Fred MacMurray.
Yeah.
It was MacMurray's last film that he ever did for Disney.
Right.
And I remember they released that on the Disney Movie Club as a DVD. And he has this one scene that he speaks with Fred MacMurray on.
Yeah.
And in the DVD, that scene is cut.
Huh.
So you see him in the film physically reacting to Kurt Russell, but he doesn't speak. And in the original VHS and the version they showed on the Disney Channel in the 90s, he had speaking lines. So I'm thinking, could Ed Begley Jr. have demanded Disney not use his image?
Or maybe
That's
he
my
just
theory.
demanded me,
Could be, yeah.
for a speaking part, and they said, "Well, if we cut your speaking part out, you don't get to demand anything." I don't know.
There you go.
But isn't Begley in the other Dexter Riley
He
films?
is in Computer Wore Tennis Shoes as a
Okay.
contestant in the Knowledge Bowl, but he's uncredited. So that's the key thing. And Charlie and the Angel and Now You See Him, Now You Don't, they actually have a written credit for him on the screen.
Okay. Your theory is probably more plausible than what I'm going to say.
Okay.
My theory about the whole thing is I love the Dexter Riley trilogy. That's some of the best Disney stuff of those type of things that ever came out. The middle one was always kind of the oddball film because at least how they released it, it was released in widescreen when it was out on DVD, whereas the other ones weren't. They were pan and scan. So I'm wondering if there was some different situation that, like, I think Computer Wore Tennis Shoes was actually made for the anthology series, and then they said, this turned out pretty good. Let's put it in the movie theater first, which is what they did. And Disney did that a lot. They would make a movie and they'd say, this one looks pretty good. Let's put it on the theater first instead of throwing it on TV, And the second thing, which is a lesser reason, but the first and third one have William Shallard as the professor. The middle one does not.
It's William Wyndham.
Just for continuity's sake, but that's kind of a weak excuse, unless the William Wyndham estate is demanding big money for, because he didn't do too many films at Disney, so
He did not, no.
And that's the only thing I can think of, because I mean, what's the difference on the cast? I mean, most of the cast is the same. Some are only in the first movie, some are in the first two.
Yeah.
Certainly some are all three of the films, but it's like it seems odd for it to be the middle film of the thing,
Yeah.
I mean, there's no real continuity to it, but it's still fun to see them all together, I think. So
the Disney film release, it's interesting to kind of segue with what you're talking about with the aspect ratios, because one of the things I wanted to tie in with this was the idea of just Disney releases on the home video market coming to DVD. You may or may not know this one, but Disney didn't fully release their own catalog titles until about 2001, 2002. And prior to that,
I did know that,
it was the company Anchor Bay
yes.
that released a oddball, I mean, oddball selection of movies on
Yeah.
DVD. And a lot of them were in their original aspect ratios, the widescreens.
Yeah.
And when Disney put them out, most of them, I think they picked and chose which ones they wanted in original aspect ratios versus full frame, or maybe they just didn't have a good quality print. But I'll tell you, one of my favorite oddballs that I actually own is The Watcher in the Woods from
Yep.
1981.
Yep, that's one I still have. I kept some of the Anchor Bays.
Yeah.
When they started reissuing them on the Disney label, I picked and chose which ones to replace. And
Yeah.
that was one I did not replace because I said there's so much extra stuff on
There's
this
so much extra stuff, and
Anchor
they've
Bay
got
one.
this huge booklet of interviews with the
Yeah.
cast. I'm like, Anchor Bay thought
Yeah.
to do this. I mean, I found on eBay actually about a month ago this collectible tin box for the black hole that they did in limited quantities that had like reproductions of the lobby cards, a collectible booklet. I think they had like a cut piece of the film in like a collectible presentation. I'm just thinking, the black hole of all things is getting collectible treatment, and Disney can't do the same for the Shaggy Dog.
Right. Now that one I actually did upgrade on the DVD to the Disney one because when my dad got a big screen TV, I played the Anchor Bay Black Hole. I don't know if you've ever done this, and it's like big screen. Okay, I'll put my fan like that's the big screen, my whole thing. And Black Hole was like that big in the middle of it. And I go, you gotta be kidding. And so I bought the Disney one, and then that goes through the whole. I mean, it's like not the greatest film, but you need to see it big, to get the like
theatrical presentation quality.
Theatrical thing, it's like, and so, and then they have reissued it again on the Blu-ray, but I have not, I don't know if you have, but I have not gone back and rebought everything on Blu-ray. I'm slowly doing it because
I'm picking and choosing. Like, I mean, the latest one that I got was one that I just mainly bought because, again, not on Disney Plus and never saw it in widescreen, and that is the No-Mobile.
Oh yeah.
I got the No-Mobile recently, and it's a beautifully enhanced high def presentation. The sound is beautiful. I mean, I compared it because I actually had a old VHS that I bought secondhand at a used bookstore of the No-Mobile that was, I think, pressed in like the early 80s on the Walt Disney Home Video label, and compared to the VHS, blew it right out of the water.
Yeah. I think so far the ones that I definitely got through Disney Movie Club. I mean, I'd love to have all of them. It's just they're not cheap, so it's like, and to rebuy them when I already have them on a DVD or on Disney Plus.
I go hunting on eBay myself.
If they put a bunch of extra stuff, I'd be buying it in a heartbeat. It's like, hello, put the Walt Disney stuff on there. Anyway, but and that's another reason. It's like my wife wanted me to get Old Yeller, which I did, so I have the Blu-ray of that. But all the extras that were on the big DVD set are gone, so I have to keep that too. But I've gotten ones that are totally unique, like when they put out like or they're hard to find on DVDs, like Scarecrow of Romney Marsh. I did buy that one because that was one of those tins that Leonard Maltin did.
Oh, the tins,
yeah. And you're gonna see cameos by my dogs here, so it's like this happens. This is Ludo, and Mia was on there earlier. They get demanding on podcasts, and I don't have anything else to do but just say hello. Anyway, but what was I talking about? I got Scarecrow, Romney Marsh, and then the recent animated ones. I'm not one to get Blu-ray of everything, but I wanted all the Disney animated features, at least the one from Snow White to Black Cauldron. That's like my arbitrary cutoff on Blu-ray. And so, because when I was a kid, this is kind of a funny thing. I said, I wish I could have all the Disney animated feature films on 16 millimeter. That shows you how far back we go.
Wow.
And I did eventually get them on cassette, which took forever because one of the holdouts was like Black Cauldron. Then they finally put it out. And then they finally put them all out on DVD, and I got them. And then now they finally put them all out on Blu-ray, but it took quite a bit of doing, and you had to go through the movie club to get the remaining ones, which is annoying, but those I got. So but I don't have the Love Bug one. I'd love to get that one, but again, it's another one. It's like they took all the Disney vault stuff off. It's like
That's why I held on to
it's
my DVD, because
it's
I
just
had
bare
friends.
bones, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's like
it's
it's
just the movie
frustrating.
in widescreen and a high def presentation.
Yeah. And that I can watch on Disney Plus. I mean, like I said, one day I'll get it, but it's like when you have to pay, what are they, $20 a pop or something like that?
$29.95 up to
Yeah.
$44.99.
And there's no extras. It's kind of like, and you get a little bit of a discount if you buy two, but then you have to buy two. So
It's essentially no different than either watching it on Disney Plus, or if it's not on Disney Plus, a high def version is available on Apple.
Yeah. So
or
one of these
Amazon.
days I'll get them if I get to be a bazillionaire. So I slowly am putting them together. And strangely enough, I found a few, and but you've shown the ones that you have. I found Herbie no, not that one. Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo, Herbie Goes Bananas, and Blackbeard's Ghost in FYE stores, and they were $10 a piece. So I'm like, I don't know if they got some special deal that way, because I've seen them multiple times. It can't be that people are buying these and turning those particular movies in. I think Disney has some special side deal. So I'm always checking FYE every so often, but those are the only three I've seen so far, and I got those. So
Nice.
But what else can we talk about?
Well, let me ask you this,
Yes.
because I mean, you wrote a book.
Ask away.
This is kind of my reason for wanting to get in touch with you as early on as I did in the first place. You wrote a book all about the live action Disney catalog post Walt's passing.
Yeah.
One of the things that I actually grew up on, not just with the video rentals as a kid, but I was curious to know if you were ever a fan of the paperbacks that they would release for these films.
I did, but I didn't collect them all. I have a few of them because, as a kid, I grew up with these films that are mostly covered in the book. I mean, if you've read my book, or you probably haven't memorized it, but I actually was born the day Walt Disney died. So I don't consider it to be reincarnated. It's a funny thought, but it does mean that when I was a kid, the movies that were coming out, like, I believe, and I've thought about this very hard, the very first movie I ever saw in a movie theater, although I think saw movies before this on TV, definitely, and in drive-ins prior to this. But the very first movie I saw in the movie theater was The Love Bug, 16.
Nice.
So, and I remember it being advertised on TV. I remember watching it. The only thing I remember saying to my mom when we were watching the film is the famous scene where the car splits in two, and the two halves of the car are going down the road. And I leaned over to my mom and I said, "Can this happen?" And she said, "Not usually." That was the word. She didn't say no, but she said not usually. And I go, that's a good answer, looking back on it. But I said, all right, because I was saying, is this going to happen on our ride home after we go to this movie?
That's great.
Geez, so but that was the only scene that kind of freaked me out. Yeah, I remember I was 3 years old, so it's like I was kind of like you seeing it, but I wasn't jumping up and down in a crib. I was actually getting kind of horrified, at least that one scene. The rest of it was fine. It's like, I enjoyed the car, I enjoyed the racing, I got the humor, the oil hitting his shoe and all that sort of thing, so but there are things, as you've learned, that you learn to enjoy when you watch them years later.
Yeah.
It's like I didn't know Dean Jones played the hippie that was in the other car at the drive up, the car hop,
That was a hot topic of conversation. I had joined a Herbie the Love Bug online fan club back in, I think, 1996 or 7, just right about the time I got internet for the first time. And it was actually a topic of discussion on our group message board, saying, bits and pieces of trivia anyone wants to, throw out there, go for it. And someone said, hey, did you guys know that the hippie in the drive-in scene is Dean Jones? I was like, what? And I go back and I'm like, it is.
What was the other thing? Well, I mean, my love, and this will lead to a little quick promo for my second book, my love for revisiting them years later over and over is I like old character actors.
Oh, yes.
So I'm a big fan of such things as like the Love Boat and Love American Style, and to a slightly lesser extent, but it's the same type of thing, Murder She Wrote or something, where you get all these aging actors something to do, and it's like, then you find out, like when you're a kid, you just watch it, and then you find out, years later, like North Avenue Irregulars or Freaky Friday have Patsy Kelly, and you find out that she did short comedy movies in the 30s and
With
stuff
Laurel
like
and
that.
Hardy.
Laurel and Hardy and stuff like that. I didn't know any of that. I just thought it was this old crabby lady in the Freaky Friday movie.
Mrs. Schmaus.
And that was just the tail end of her career.
It
It's
was,
like,
yeah.
it was like the beginning of her career. I didn't see till probably the last 10 years and go, oh crap, it's the same lady. It's Mrs. Schmaus. Like
you're right on the money there talking about character actors, because I told, so many kids growing up, I learned how to read by reading the opening and closing credits of Disney films. And so I would, take these names and memorize them. And then, like, another perfect example, you were mentioning like The Love Boat and what was the other one you mentioned?
Murder She Wrote. Yeah.
Murder She Wrote.
Or Love American Style.
Yeah, for me, one of the more recent ones in recent years that my buddy got me hooked on, Barney Miller. Tons of character actors from both the Disney catalog and Universal and Hal Roach Studios, just popping up left and right. And one of the longest character actors who have been with us, and he just recently passed away this year. I'm probably going to butcher his name, but I'm going to do the best I can. Nehemiah Persoff.
Oh, Nehemiah Persoff.
Nehemiah, thank you.
Yeah.
He was in Some Like It Hot in 1959, and here he is playing a Hasidic rabbi in Barney Miller. And in looking back, I'm thinking to myself, is that guy still alive? And he lived, I think, this year to be like 101.
Yeah. Where I knew him was he was in a couple episodes of Gilligan's Island. So, and then, so he did a lot of just like bit roles in episodic television. He was just a working actor. I think he was on an episode of Mission Impossible that was pretty good, one of the first season ones. And so, and the other thing I was going to say about these type of actors is you see actors that sometimes don't do necessarily on camera roles, or you find out later that they didn't. Like George O'Hanlon does a few of these films, and it's like he's George Jetson, and I go, oh my god, there he is. And then I found out years later he did the Joe McDokes shorts for years, but I didn't know that, until Warner Archives started reissuing old stuff, and I go, oh, so he did have a career before George Jetson. But
I saw Douglas Fowley, who played the husband of Mrs. Rafferty, Patsy Kelly, in the North Avenue Regulars. He appeared in an old Laurel and Hardy Fox film, I think, called The Bullfighters from 1944.
So my next Disney book, this is what the plug was for, and it's written, it's just not published yet, because during this pandemic, I was writing like a fiend, but things weren't getting published. So there's a backlog, and we're not issuing them all today. So this one will probably come out next year, because it's just kind of like, let's give it like 6 months to a year between books, Mark, so you're not throwing everything out there. But it's Stars of Walt Disney Productions.
Oh, nice.
So it's literally every Disney appearance by all these stars. Now, how I broke it up is I have a big section of like the big stars that everybody knows. So it's like a big star would obviously be like a Dean Jones or a Fred McMurray or Kurt Russell, somebody who did multiple films. They may or may not be known now. That's not necessarily the case, but most of them are. But even I'll have a little bit more obscure ones. But she did a lot of films like Iris Adrian or something like that.
Vito Scotti, my personal favorite.
Yeah. So, and then I have a section on one-hit wonders. It's like people that did like one Disney film, but it's so memorable. I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head, because most people did at least two. Here's one. James Mason. He only did 20,000 Leagues. It's like, but he's memorable in the role. So, example, and things like that. So, and then I just have kind of like a back section of people who had multiple roles, but they're not really well known. They were just kind of like window dressing on various Disney films. I mean, the obvious one is like Pete Renaday, who did voiceovers for Disney movie attractions. he had little cameos in Disney movies, but he never became a huge star. But I will talk
I'm
about it.
friends with Pete on Facebook, and I've written to him before. He actually was a very sweet, kind gentleman. He provided an email that I was actually able to read at the 40th anniversary celebration of the Love Bug get together my Herbie group had in Orlando.
Yeah.
Answered a whole bunch of questions I had. I think at the time he may have been in his late 70s.
I
And
think he's
you
still
know, couldn't
around,
have
isn't
been.
he?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
he is
Okay.
still around. And I think he does
Hadn't
occasional
died.
appearances
Yeah.
at the D23 conventions.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he could have been more welcoming to answering my questions. I mean, I told him, did you know in the very first scene they filmed is your scene, where Herbie's trying to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge? That was the first scene they filmed. And he wrote back saying, I didn't know that was the first scene we were
I didn't
filming.
even know that.
Yeah, and he told me the other policeman that was with him, another classic character actor, Herb Vigran.
Oh yeah.
He said that he actually used to work a lot on the Disney lot with Pete in a sort of repertory company, a small repertory group of actors that they had there that would do like one-act play festivals. And I was just like, they did one-act play festivals at the Disney lot and off times. It's amazing.
So yeah. The one thing though, as far as the book goes, is that I originally was just going to stick with the live action stuff, and then after working on it, there's enough. I'd started. Well, I'll use like Joe Flynn as an example. He does a voice in The Rescuers, so I said, well, okay, if they're a
Posthumously.
live action person, but they did voices, I'll put the voice roles. And then after a while, I just said, screw it, I'll do all the voice roles too. And so then that opened up a whole nother can of worms, and I had Pinto Colvig and Clarence Ducky Nash and all sorts of people. So I said, well, how do I stop? Where do I stop? And I said, well, it's like I'll just stop when it's the end of Walt Disney Productions. So it's kind of like it ends at the end of the Frozen in Ice again. It's not if they did stuff afterwards, because I know some people came back. Like for example, Dean Jones did a later, Love Bug film or something that was post 1985.
Buddy Hackett did the voice
Yeah,
of Scuttle in The Little
yeah, I
Mermaid.
will mention it in like the bio description, but it won't be in the laundry list of all their appearances. So that's kind of how I determined that, because I said,
Gotcha.
it's really people that are in Walt Disney Productions, not the Walt Disney Company, not Walt Disney Pictures, and all the other names that Disney Enterprises and junk I don't like. I still wish it was Walt Disney Productions, but hey, you gotta change. I wish the park was like it was in the '80s, not very crowded. But anyway, so you know, but we
Well,
still have the
here's a
film.
question I would like to actually ask you a question.
Yeah,
Because you had ended the book. I don't know if you had read the actual review that I wrote on Amazon about it,
probably have.
but I was curious to know because you pretty much said exactly what I was thinking by the epilogue, and I was just curious, did you actually invest in Disney stock?
No, I never did, because I was considering it and I just somehow never did, which, shame on me, I guess. Um, I don't know. I don't know if you have to be old enough to purchase stock, but it never crossed my mind until I became an adult, and I was 18 in 1984, the end of the year. So Eisner already had taken over by that point. I don't know. It never crossed my mind that it would suddenly skyrocket in value, and big mistake. But I wasn't even thinking about that. I ended up. Here's my one foray into stock, other than mutual funds and other things, where I purposely bought a stock or stocks. Is I'm a big Harvey Comics fan, and Harvey Comics went public, so I said, "Oh, okay, I will buy their stock." And when the Casper movie came out in the mid '90s, it went to a high of $16 a share, and I'm like, all right. And then, like 8 years later, it was bought out by Classic Media, and the stock was worthless. So, but it had already gone down to nothing and got delisted by that point. It's like I'm real good winner with stocks, but that's kind of the nature of me with gambling and stuff like that. That's why if I go gamble at a casino, I just say, "Here's my donation to Las Vegas." It's like I'm not going
We
to sit.
thank you.
Yeah, I just treat it like a video game. I'm not going to sit there and say, "Damn it, I lost $3,000." Well, I'm not going to gamble that much either. I might gamble, a couple rolls of nickels or something just for fun. Maybe if I get a little bit ahead, okay, I'll keep playing. But yeah, no, I'm just not that way.
Smart.
Yeah. And I don't have that gambling bug in that way. You see cartoons where like Fred Flintstone, bet. Yeah. When I start losing too much money, I go, time for me to leave. That's how I kind of think. So
Gotcha.
anyway,
I look forward to that follow-up book. It
okay,
sounds right up my alley.
yeah. I wish I could kind of just publish them all, get them all published now, but I get it. Even if I was writing them concurrently, my publisher is Bear Manor Media. They said, well, it's like it's best if we don't put them all out at once, unless there's a real need to. And I go, no, there's not. So the next one is coming out in September. It's a Pac-Man book, and it talks about the Hanna-Barbera Pac-Man show. My last book came out in December of last year. It was a total television scrapbook. And so the next one on the roster is the Disney one. So that will be out, and I'm still working on other books that I either had started or whatever when the pandemic started, like a Mad Magazine book, and I'm still working on that, but I'm definitely wanting the Disney book out before that. So anyway. Let's see. So what are your favorite Disney movies genre-wise then?
I'm guilty as charged of loving the good old car chase slapstick. What in the world is that doing on the screen type films? Like, just to name a couple. Again, most of these are and are not on Disney Plus. No Deposit, No Return.
Mm-hmm.
The Shaggy BA.
That one is, but yeah, I like that one.
Yep. I believe this one came out, North Avenue Irregulars, the ultimate car crash finale. I'd say another one that I am a big fan of is actually Return from Witch Mountain, not the original, but the sequel. I happen to like a lot more. And I think it's because not only does it have, great car chase with incredible special effects, but it takes place in Los Angeles, 1978. So, live shooting in those streets, like with the fact that you can watch it in high def on Disney Plus, in any scene that takes place on a street with a sign, I'll pause and I'll kind of, zoom in on the sign and try to like pinpoint, like, okay, that was Redondo, that's Chinatown, that's Upper LA.
Yeah.
So
Well, I like it because I briefly lived in LA, Palos Verdes to be exact,
okay.
from 1973 to 1976.
Oh,
So
nice.
1978 wouldn't have been much different. So, it's nice to have on film the Southern California that I remember, firsthand. And I go, yep, that's how it looked, because you go down there now, it doesn't look anything like that. So it's like, at least it's preserved on film because of that, And there's other people, they go, oh, I like it when this old Three Stooges shows something. Yeah, but that doesn't resonate as much to me because I wasn't alive in the 30s. So it's like, I mean, it's nice to see the Hollywood Land sign or something like that in an old thing, or, oh, these are the steps in the music box or whatever in Laurel and Hardy. But it's also fun, to have things of 1960s, 70s vintage too, and I know a lot of people poo-poo these films. They poo-poo Disney. They said, oh, they weren't at their greatest then. They put out crap, blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
I'm still going to watch them.
Yeah, exactly. But, I look back on it and you look at other films, Disney wasn't that far off the mark. If, in my book, The Frozen in Ice, we do talk about, or I do talk about other children's films that came out concurrently, and a lot of them look like Disney films. I mean, I'll just mention a few, like Benji. What was another one? the Wilderness Family or something. It's like I can't think
Chomps.
of other one. Yours, Mine, and Ours. That are considered Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. They all kind of look like Disney films, and they're all made by other studios.
Yeah.
Dr. Dolittle, the original with Rex Harrison, stuff like that. And people say, "Oh, Disney was behind the times." Blah 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 blah. No, they were keeping up with everyone else. The only big difference, and I mentioned it in the book, is when Star Wars came out. That was the big game changer.
Yep.
It's like
Blockbuster.
it's like that was a film Disney should have made, which is ironic because now they own it. But at the time, Lucas didn't want to use Disney's in-house team and for special effects and production and everything, and Disney said no. And had it been a Disney film, probably would have had Jodie Foster for sure instead of Carrie Fisher.
And I think Kurt Russell even did audition for
yeah. So I mean,
Skywalker.
and the special effects would have been typical rear screen projection of its day. It probably would have had easier laser blasts and stuff of it's like it would be more of kind of a Ray Harryhausen type level, which ironically in the original Star Wars, the little chess pieces are Ray Harryhausen type figures, so but it was the big transitionary film where previously Disney was the leader of children's entertainment, and they actually 1974 through 76 were like the best years Disney had up until that point. Suddenly, oh crap, now we have to worry about this.
There's now money in these pictures.
And then they come up with their answer film. The ironic one is, everybody says the black hole, but actually they came out with Cat from Outer Space first.
Cat from Outer Space.
Ironically, is very close to E.T.
Yes.
And
it's funny you mentioned that one. I had just recently come from a show last weekend called The Hollywood Show. It's a gathering of celebrities from film, television, and music. And there was an appearance by Jackie Joseph, who was married to Ken Berry. And there was a gentleman actually selling original memorabilia from his personal collection. And from actually that collection, I actually got an original Herbie Rides Again press book and ad pad. And I said to the gentleman, how much you want for this? I'm thinking, I'm gonna have to shell out a couple $100. So he says, 10, give me 10. Like, are you serious? Like, this was owned by Ken Berry. He's like, 10. I got no use for it. He did, however, have 2 framed original posters for both Herbie Rides Again and the Cat from Outer Space. And he even was looking at him like, you want these posters? I'm like, I'd love to, but I can't. He's like, come on, make me an offer. I'm like, I can't. He's like, what's stopping you? I'm like, can you ship them to Las Vegas? The guy's like, no. I was like, that's the reason.
I'm not a big poster collector anymore. I used to be. And then unfortunately, posters kind of get damaged and everything else. And I think since the internet, I said, I can, blow up a nice picture and look at it there. And I put all the movie I keep plugging my own book. I put all the movie posters in here, so I don't have to own them.
my whole thing that I've been working on, where I'm reporting from or recording from right now, is known as Phil's Movie Manor. Where, as you can see behind me, is most of my Blu-ray DVD collection. And what I've got on my wall is I have 3 different movie posters hung up. But I've thought to myself, you know what? I can get smaller posters for like $5 a piece and just plaster the entire wall with movie posters cheaply. And I said to myself, I'm going to take these big ones down, stop worrying about having these big original movie posters, and just get the reproduced smaller versions that I can just plaster the entire wall with. And it's like, wherever you look, there's a different movie poster.
I mean, I do collect other pieces of ephemera. So over the years, through my encounters with Disney collectors and things like that, like I do have like lobby cards for like The Strongest Man in the World, and I have press kits for like $1 Million Duck, and I forget which ones. I have some promo records that are really hard to find for like Bed Knobs and Broomsticks that have like audio cues and things like that. They don't even have sleeves. Now that's a different one than I have.
That's
Is
the
that a
laser
laser disc?
disc.
Oh, that's the laser disc. Okay. Yeah, I have this. It has music cues and commercials for it,
Oh,
and
nice.
it's just in a brown sleeve. It's like a giant single or something, and the label is not, how a label is probably like, it's like this big, which is really weird. So, and there's a big, oops, I'm not on the camera here. There's like gaps between the grooves. So this is like commercial spot one,
Yeah.
commercial spot two, so
No, I love those
three,
old time
four,
Disney
and
radio
it's like,
spots. They're really
this
hard to
is like
come by.
really rare stuff because nobody
Yeah.
plays this stuff. And I could upload it onto the internet, I suppose, but I don't really have time to do stuff like that. But it's weird that it's out there.
Yeah, a friend of mine in the Herbie group, he had an old record of Love Bug radio spots and Herbie Rides Again radio spots, and he actually just converted them onto an audio cassette. This was
Yeah.
back in about 2001. And then when I got into college, I was doing radio. I had my own radio show in college for 3.5 years, and I had full access to the mix board and everything. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to do him one better. So I took the cassette, converted it into stereo format, digital wave files, put it on a CD. I was like, all right, if anyone wants this on CD now, come get in touch with me. I'll send it out to you.
Yeah. I always think Disney's missing the boat on this. So like they could put out a lot of this stuff as, a collection, like the Disney promotion collection. And it's like, I don't know, the powers that be at Disney, they're more concerned, like I said, about Star Wars,
That's
Muppets,
what's on their
and
mind right now.
what's the other one? Marvel,
Marvel.
and National Geographic. And it's like,
Well, I'll tell you, it's interesting you bring that up because one thing that's been published sporadically, I don't know if you remember these. There used to be weekly comic strips in local newspapers for all the new animated and live action Disney films, and they were called Walt Disney's Treasury of Classic Tales. They've printed anthologies of 3 volumes so far. And I think they've gotten it all the way up to about 1960 with the movie Kidnapped. And I'm just thinking, they've really got to do more of these because these were only found in local newspapers. So if you weren't clipping these in your hometown and preserving them, there's no way to find these except in the Disney archives. So I'm hoping they're going to do subsequent volumes because I'd love to read one for the Absent-Minded Professor, the Herbie movies, the Shaggy DA, all these classic live action films got individual weekly comic strips, and there are 3 volumes out so far. I'm thinking, what's stopping them from making more?
Yeah. Well, it's really odd about Disney in that regard. I mean, they got it to the point where, okay, not everybody wants these old films, so I get it. You put it on
limited audience,
the Disney Movie Club. I get it, and it's like that's fine because Warner did Warner Archives, and the other there's like
manufactured on demand,
Universal Vault, or one of these other ones. It's like all the different movie studios put their more obscure titles on print on demand, which is great. They need to go one step further and do like press kits on demand or audio clips on demand or whatever. It's like there are enough Disney nerds or fans out there that like this older stuff, but they fail to see that part of things. I don't know what the deal is. It's like some block on the road or something where they go, oh, nobody wants this crap anymore or something. I don't know what they think.
I have this philosophy to something like that, and it's kind of extreme, but I guess it's kind of how I've often said, there's a difference between being a nerd and being a geek. And I personally feel it had a lot to do with Comic-Con. And I feel like right around 2010, 2011, Comic-Con kind of ruined everything that was old entertainment and nostalgia. And they kind of just push that aside into its own block and say, all right, nostalgia is nostalgia. Comic-Con is what we've got to keep on doing right now.
And that's about the beginning of the end for me. The last time I've been to Comic-Con was 2013, but it was around what you're saying, 2010, that I was kind of losing interest. I said, why don't I like this anymore? And it's because they keep shoving the stuff I'm interested in to a smaller and smaller cubbyhole in a very, very big crowded space. And I don't really want to go to this because of that, so I still get free passes each year, but I pass them on to other friends, and it's like, you're not supposed to do that, but I do it, it's like, because they want to go, they can go, so just pretend to be me,
Yeah.
and then if I
I will
ever,
attend the Hollywood show over ComicCon any year.
yeah, and I've been there a few times. I haven't been there in a while either, but I went to the Hollywood show. I hate to say the last. I don't know if you're a Monkees fan at all,
Oh
but
yeah.
the last time Davy Jones appeared, which is 2 weeks before he passed away,
Oh, that would
it's
have
like,
been like 2012 or
yeah,
2013.
2012, yeah, and I always tell this story, but I'll say it again. It's like if you took bets in this room of who would die by the end of February of 2012, I can bet you Davy Jones wouldn't have been on anybody's list, because in the room that day there was Martin Landau, who was very elderly that day, but he lasted a few more years. And the kicker is Carla Lemley from Universal was there, and she's 105, and she lived like 3 or 4 more years. So it's like, so um, you know, fortunately, I spent some time talking to him. I got his autograph and everything like that. And it's like, but yeah, wow, I would have never thought he would have been gone by the end of the month. But, you
Yeah.
know, I do that, I try to treat everyone that way, because I go, you never know when they're going to go, and
Well, that's kind of, I'll show you another one here. That's kind of at the last Hollywood show I went to. I've been working to try to get more autographs from those that I figure are probably not going to be with us much longer. Well,
yeah.
with my Flight of the Navigator Laserdisc, I got Veronica Cartwright to autograph it. And, she was, full of energy, happy to meet us as fans. But I thought to myself, she was seated right next to Tom Skerritt. They were doing an Alien reunion. And I look at Tom Skerritt, and the man looks like he's going to keel over at any second. And I'm like, well, Veronica looks great. But at
Yeah.
the same time, she's like, I think about maybe 2 or 3 years younger than him. So it's like, keep that in mind.
And what else was I going to say about it? Something about those Hollywood shows. Come back to me. It's not that important. We're kind of going off topic, which is fine. Let's see. Now, I will tell you, and you probably know this from the book. I could tell you anything. It's probably already in the book, but I have a soft spot for what I call the dopey Disney comedies. So, other people call them the Disney gimmick comedies. I mean, definitely Love Bug and those films would fall into that. It's a car that's magical, has personality. The same thing with like
Million Dollar
Absent-Minded
Duck.
Professor. It's like you got the car that flies, and with Flubber and all that stuff. It's some gimmick, and certainly the Dexter Riley films, with their gimmicks of extreme intelligence, invisibility, and super strength. So that's the type I love. And I used to go wait for like what's the next crazy gimmick they're going to come up with
How
over
about
at
a
Disney.
duck that lays golden eggs?
Yes. Yeah. And I was old enough, so like when Freaky Friday came out, I knew about the book, but I don't think I had read it yet.
I
It's
hadn't
like
either.
it was one of the first, if not the first, of the parent-child switch. Afterwards, they did tons of those films, not Disney, but other people. It's like, but that was kind of like the first one that was like that. And it's like, I just adored, what they would do with that type of thing. The other thing that's interesting about Disney comedies, especially, but Disney films in general, is they're very logical. Now, other people they that's crap and everything like that, but they really tie up loose ends. It's really hard to find plot holes in a lot of Disney movies, and they must have gone over those scripts with a fine-tooth comb, figuring that some nerd someday would say, "But what about It's like we can accept that a car can have a personality, but we can't have this little plot hole in here," you know. And I marvel at that, how meticulous the scripts are. And I don't know if it's because the writers and their expertise, or it was directors like you mentioned, Robert Stevenson, or what are
Norman
some of the
Tokar.
other ones? Yeah, what?
Norm Tokar.
Yeah, and that's one of them. And
Vincent McAveety.
yeah, I can't think of all of them, but I'll look them up.
I'll
But
drop them if you need them.
yeah. um, but yeah, they all did their kind of little type of niche. Like Tokar tended to do more animal films and things like that. Stevenson tended to do the more fantasy type films, but he dabbled in the humorous ones too. And but they all seem to make really logical sense. That's how, within their illogic of, no, a bed can't fly, or no, people can't turn invisible, or whatever. So anyway.
Well, one interesting thing I discovered, I don't know if you had found this out while writing your first Disney book. When I was searching on eBay for just some promotional items for Disney in the 70s, there was this calendar book released showing upcoming projects that they had for, I believe, 1975.
Mhm.
And one of them was this film they were going to call Instant Muscle Man. And it was like, Instant Muscle Man. And it's just this like logo with the guy flexing his muscles. I'm like, that was the original title for The Strongest Man in the World, because the theme, written by I believe it was I can't remember the name of the composer, but the theme was actually known as Instant Muscle. I'm like, well, that makes sense, because the original title was going to be Instant Muscle Man.
Right. I like the original title of The Love Bug was like
Carboy Girl.
Yeah, Carboy Girl. It's like, Jesus. Yeah. That's goofy.
It is what it is.
Yeah. But it's like, and they did like mock up things with that title, and I said, ooh, that would have been, sometimes, I don't know if you about this, but sometimes titles either make me cringe, or I don't get them till a zillion years later. Like, I never got the title The Boatniks was a play on the Beatniks for the longest time. And I said, oh, duh, obviously.
When I was a kid and I was learning to read, and when I first saw that, I thought it said the Boatkins. I was like, the Boatkins? What's the Boatkins? And then I realized, oh, Boatniks, like Beatniks. Got it.
Yeah.
Now here's another one for you. I'll drop this one. Just because, again, random sounding movie title, hilarious movie for my personal preference. No Deposit, No Return was originally going to be called simply Double Trouble.
Yeah.
And the original script, which I've seen float around from time to time on eBay, even called it that. Now, how it got to No Deposit, No Return, I don't know. But I'm thinking, Double Trouble, I would go see that. No Deposit, No Return sounds some like weird banking movie, having to do with like money troubles.
It's funny. But I'd kill to be on some of these like
production meetings.
Production meetings to like decide, what are we going to do and how are we going to do this and everything like that. It couldn't have been all what would Walt do. It was probably like, more importantly, what are we going to do?
I don't think the car chase theme would have been in Walt's ideas there. I don't think he was that kind of person. He would have said, show a nice car that I will personally pay for to be on screen, because we're doing a cross promotion with Chrysler or Chevrolet. Whereas, it's like, all right, how many cars can we get on the LA freeways for the next 4 hours without police interruption?
Mm-hmm. I'm feeding my dogs water, if you're wondering.
Oh, okay.
Because I realized I don't really want to stop, but I have to give them something because they're pressuring me. They're like, we're thirsty. We don't have anything. So.
No worries.
All right, so that's our weird pause in the middle of this. Okay, so that's it for now, dogs. Okay. All right. So now I can't drink out of that. Anyway, so watch me do it, and everybody go, oh, hey.
We'll fix that in post.
I can't even say it. You probably know it. The Shaggy Dog or Shaggy DA phrasing from the little medallion, and Kent and Canis.
In Canis Corpore Transmuta.
There we go. Oh no. Anyway. All right. Let's see. What's some of your favorite actors from a lot of the Disney films?
Definitely Dean Jones. I grew up watching so much of what he did even outside the company. I remember the very first film of his I saw outside of Disney was Beethoven in 1992. And then I had seen him on a couple of TV shows. I think he did an appearance on Murder, She Wrote. And he had a very serious dramatic role on an old network show called Nowhere Man, about a man whose memory has been completely wiped out, and he's trying to like find, things that'll jigger his memory. And one of them, he goes to a baseball game that's being coached by Dean Jones,
Yeah.
and he realizes that it's his dad, but
Right.
he's like had a complete change of background. Like apparently he had run-ins with the law and whatnot. And this was about 1995, 1996. And
Hmm.
there's a scene where Dean actually threatens him with a shotgun. I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
this is the man who drove Herbie holding a shotgun. And
Right.
I'm like,
Right.
whoa.
Right.
Others I absolutely loved. As I mentioned before, one of my favorite character actors, Vito Scotti.
Oh yeah.
He is actually my handle in my Herbie the Love Bug fan club, which is Wiper Third Class from
Hmm.
Herbie Goes Bananas. And it was funny because Vito was the kind of guy who I used to see every time on a TV show someone was going to say something to the effect of, well, let's go to that Italian restaurant. I hear the manager will let us in for cheap. And I'm thinking, oh, it's going to be Vito. It's going to be Vito. It's going to be Vito. Camera segues to the outer part of the restaurant. And then you hear, yes, we got the beautiful spaghetti for you. You're going to enjoy. And it's Vito. I'm like, of
Yeah.
course it's Vito.
The funny thing about Vito Scotti is he didn't always play Italians. He played
Yeah.
like everybody. Like I mentioned Gilligan's Island earlier, he played
Japanese.
Japanese
Yeah.
with stereotypical big thick glasses and
the
buck
teeth.
teeth and all that stuff. And I'm like, wow, you couldn't even get like say George Takei. You had to get Vito Scotti for this. But it's like I know they wanted a comedic actor, and I get it. And there wasn't such PC stuff, but it just kind of boggled my mind. It's casting choices sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
geez,
Joe Flynn, another, who I just
yeah.
absolutely love. And I also grew up watching old reruns of McHale's Navy. And when I moved out to Vegas, I took part in a radio audio drama that a friend of mine produced. And one of my co-stars at our after party one time was talking about McHale's Navy. And I came up and I said, what is this you're talking about here? What is this? Why? And he's like, what 25-year-old does impressions of Joe Flynn? I'm like, this
That's great.
25-year-old.
That's great. Yeah.
Pete Renaday also, who again would just pop up just about as any background police officer, interviewer, hotel clerk. He had that everyman look. I saw him recently, actually. I think in an old episode, it was Night Court. He was just a random guy in Night Court who popped up. I'm like, hey, it's Pete Renaday. And another one who I really just, I think had it not been for Disney and the first time I ever watched the Shaggy DA, I would not known of him, the late, great Tim Conway. You can't beat Tim Conway. And from that, I think I got my love for the Carol Burnett show. Reruns, him and Harvey Korman.
Yeah.
And I actually met Vicki Lawrence a number of times, and I had seen her perform live here in Vegas. She did a two-part act, one as herself and the second as Mama from Mama's Family. And whenever I asked her stories about Tim Harvey and even Ken Berry, she said, they couldn't have been sweeter gentlemen to work with. Very professional, very funny. And, she always says, how she wishes there could be more comedians like them.
Yeah. And I'm a big Carol Burnett show fan too. And I like to pride myself. We did an episode on here, Wesley Hyatt and me, about Carol Burnett show, because you wrote a book about Carol Burnett show. If you don't have it, it's excellent. But in recent times, they've never put all the Carol Burnett shows out on home video, but in recent times, there's at least a 20-minute edited version, usually minus the musical numbers, of every episode available for streaming now, which I'm very happy about. So,
which I've gone through, actually.
Yeah, and I did too. At the beginning of this year, once I found that out and they're showing them in order, I was like, okay, I'll do this. It's like, and so it took me a while, but I got through them all. Like I got through the last season, and it's like I was watching it new then, and I think Dick Van Dyke is a god too. But I said, wow, these are really bad. The ones with Dick Van Dyke. And I'm like, no wonder he left the show after like 9 episodes or something like that. It's like, he's done better elsewhere. So, including Disney. Although there is one, I should ask you this. I don't like asking negatives so much, but like one of my least favorite Disney films is Lieutenant Robin
Robin Crusoe USN,
which is a Dick Van Dyke film, and I'm like, you know, and I did
You
have
have
to watch it for the purposes of the book, but it's like I was like,
let me tell you something. There is
Okay.
at least one bad film out of the bunches of films that my personal favorites have done. For my Dean Jones worst, it's Monkeys Go Home.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, it's hard to watch.
Could not rewatch that if you paid me.
Yeah, and that's on a Blu-ray from Disney
A
Movie
club,
Club, and
yeah.
it's not on Disney Plus. And
Nope.
part of me says, "Oh, maybe I should buy it because it's not on Disney Plus." But I go, I know it's not that great of a film. why can't they put out the other Dean Jones films that they don't have?
The only redeeming quality it has, if you want to look at it from a trivia standpoint, is the alternate universe cast of the Love Bug when they were originally going to cast Yvette Mimieux in the role of Carol prior to Michelle Lee.
Right. Now I've gone so crazy. You mentioned Dean Jones being one of your favorites, so I like Dean Jones. I like all the ones you said pretty well. Dean Jones is just kind of like I've gone beyond Disney because his other non-Disney stuff is pretty good. So, and also hard to find. Like I got what's the name of it? It's
Mr. Super Invisible.
I don't have that one. I have the one where he doesn't play Abe Lincoln, but it's like it's a TV movie he did around.
When every day was the 4th of July.
No, not that one.
Huh?
Mr. Lincoln and his whiskers or something to that effect. I have to look it up. I don't have it. Let me look it up while I'm talking to you. Ha ha ha. But you know, I've gotten his two. I think he only has 2 music albums. That are solo albums, and you know, I just, you know, like, you know, I adore the guy. The one thing I would like, and it's not a Disney thing, but it's very Disney-like because I do remember watching it, is they did this kind of comedic gangster film TV series in the early
the
70s.
Chicago Teddy Bears.
Yeah, and you know, it has John Banner from Hogan's Heroes.
Art Metrano.
Yeah, and I forgot who else is in it, but I mean, it's like
Jamie Farr.
Yeah, and it wasn't a Disney show that kind of should have been a Disney show. It really looked like
I would love to track down old episodes of that because the only thing I can come up with online is the opening title credits.
Yep, and that's the only thing I've seen. But I watched it originally when I was a kid, but you know, it's like, you know, memories get whatever here. Let me see here. I got Dean Jones thing, television, and I think it was early 70s. Okay. The Great Man's Whiskers, 1972.
Never heard of that one.
Yeah, and it was actually made, I think, in like 1969, and for some reason was shelved, and it aired in 72, which I remember. And it's not on home video, at least legally, you know. And so I managed to secure a copy. If you do, you'd probably enjoy it because it's like a Disney film again, but it's not by Disney.
Okay.
And something else that he did, like Grimm's fairy tales or something.
Oh yeah,
like,
the brothers. It's like the Adventures of the Brothers Grimm or something.
Yeah, and that's a very Disney-like film too. So you know, it's kind of like even if he wanted to run away from that image, he didn't run very far. It's just kind of funny about him.
I think like the very first time seeing him serious, other than Beethoven, when I discovered, and I've only watched a few clips of it, the whole thing is on YouTube. It was the film he did right after his final Disney film back then, Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo, and it's a 1978 film called Born Again, where he plays Chuck Colson, who was Nixon's advisor in the time of Watergate.
Yeah.
And it's all about his time in prison and starting like a born-again Christian program for the inmates. Now, I've watched bits and pieces of it, and again, he is very, very serious in that film, and it got apparently a ton of accolades when it was originally released, but it's only ever been released on VHS.
Yeah. And that one, I'll agree, is a little bit different. But for the most part, most of Dean Jones, it's kind of like, hi, I'm Dean Jones. I'm playing Dean Jones, kind of like that, you know, because it seems to me, based on interviews and stuff like that, is he was a likable sort of fellow. I never met him, but he had a temper if he needed to, or, you know, like, you know, to quote Shaggy DA, my house has been robbed, you know, it's like that, you know.
I think, yeah, you're nailing that right on the head there, especially for me, even though it's a voice moment.
Yeah.
If I were to recreate a trailer for like a brand, and I've had this idea since probably high school to do a brand new Herbie film where it's Tim Douglas, Jim's son, who takes over the racing legacy. And the idea I had was a voice clip from the Shaggy DA where when Keenan Wynn, as John Slade, is threatening to shoot him down, he says, drop out of the race and I promise no harm will come to you. And you just hear the voice of Dean Jones go, I'm in this race to the end. And I thought if I could use that in the trailer, it's like, I'm in this race to the end. And then you see like 30 years later. Like that's really good reading on Dean's part. But yeah, you're right. Like that whole emotional, like, oh, I don't feel like the sky is falling down on you. These things happen. Call back. Call back. My house has been robbed.
And then later, my house has been robbed again.
And of course, John Myers, another great character actor as the Admiral, next door when he hears that, just that, oh, not again.
Now, I wanted to mention this on Joe Flynn. I had to look it up too.
Sure.
Joe Flynn is kind of known for his typical kind of slow burn, kind of
Very
way
Edgar
that he
Kennedy.
kind of perfected on McHale's Navy and basically just kept for the rest of his life. But, I don't know if you've ever seen the Lon Chaney horror film called The Indestructible Man.
No.
Yeah. So Joe Flynn's in it. It's kind of a sort of prominent role as like a lab assistant, but you kind of have to look quick at it because it's like he just acts normal. He doesn't act the Joe Flynn way that you're expecting him to act. So, and that's in the public domain, so it's a very easy film to get. It's probably on YouTube. It's The Indestructible Man, but it's like, wow, he could do different things if he wanted to.
You kind of reminded me, the way you're describing that, it kind of sounds like another small blink and you'll miss it, but it is on YouTube, I believe. He had a very brief, like less than 10-second appearance, I believe, on an episode of the old Batman TV series with Adam West and Burt Ward. And I'm pretty sure he's actually playing it straight in his little tiny scene.
Right. Yeah. So he could do that, but it's like that's the whole nature of all these Disney films is we go into these films wanting these character actors to do what they do best. It's like if you suddenly see Keenan Wynn quoting Shakespeare, it better be kind of hammy and with a shaking of a fist. And, it's like after that, you go, that's how you do it. Now get out of my town. It's something like that. It has to be how we expect, which I know is the reason why people don't like these Disney films because they're too predictable. But that's the reason why I love them. So.
Well, here's one for you. Here's one I'll throw your way. A deep cut here. Have you ever heard of or seen the Disney cartoon VD Attack Plan?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So Keenan Wynn is the narrator in that.
Yeah, and that's very straight.
Yeah, when you hear him literally saying like, here's another thing that can stop you, a rubber. Like, oh my God. Did Alonzo Hawk just say what I think he said?
And here's how it works. And then you cut to the clip in Herbie Rides Again where he's swatting down the cars off the building. Anyway, I don't know if you know this guy. His name's Steve Thompson. He goes by the name of Book Steve. I should try to get him on the show. But he literally reviews books all the time. And he used to work in a bookstore. He's on Facebook and everything like that. He's been around forever. But one day he posted that he felt 1974 was the best year of movies. Some people say 1939. Well, I say 1974. Now, I wasn't quibbling with him, but I went down his list and, looked at what he had. He had like The Godfather Part 2, Conversation, blah, 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 blah. Let's see what's on here. And I said, oh, you missed one. And I put Herbie Rides Again, put the poster up. And he goes, yeah, I did. It's like, but then he had
to wedge that right between Earthquake and the Towering Inferno.
Then he had those on the list. And it's like, then he had to admit, I did see that movie when that came out. And I know you did because that was a very successful film for Disney. That was probably the second. I looked at the 1974 grosses, and I think it was number 2 for the year. You
Oh,
know,
wow.
it was up there. It was in the top 10. I know that, but I believe it was number 2. I have to look again. So don't quote me on that one. But it's like, for a movie that's continually maligned, saying, "Oh, it's a cheap sequel. Oh, it's typical Disney crap." Certainly did well at the box office. And they wouldn't have done a third and fourth movie if the second movie hadn't done that well.
The one question I'm always getting from people on that are like non-die-hard Herbie fans is, why didn't Dean Jones come back? And it's like, well, I have two thoughts on that. Number one, he was filming Snowball Express or, The $1 Million Duck or something else. And the second thought is, well, they wanted to turn the story off into new territory. That's all.
Actually, he wasn't at Disney's. Snowball Express came out in 72. He stopped working for Disney in 72. And
Okay.
I think it was because he was working on the Chicago Teddy Bears. And I think he probably felt, after doing about 7 years of Disney films, he was getting stuck in a rut. So he didn't want to do any more Disney films. So his next film was Herbie Goes to Monte Carlo, but that was in
Actually, it was
70.
his Shaggy DA.
Oh,
One
Shaggy
year
DA,
before.
that's right. I'm sorry. That was first. But there was a 4-year gap where he wasn't at Disney at all in any way, shape, or form. And I think he was just trying to exercise his acting muscle, realize he needed to pay the bills or whatever, or realize that Disney wasn't that bad of a place to work. Because I've heard from various actors that worked there that during that time, during the 70s, they all kind of knew it was corny stuff, but they were treated like kings. They were treated like royalty. In most movie studios didn't treat their actors that well. So why not? You
Yeah.
wonder why they came back over and over again. That was why. So
There is a picture that I found recently. I posted it on my Facebook and my Instagram, um, of Peter Ustinov having lunch at the commissary at the Disney studio. And I managed to actually find a menu from that era. And you look at this menu, the stuff that they had available for under like $7 a piece, an item. You could get like a luxurious steak dinner or turkey dinner for only about $4.95.
yeah.
All the trimmings and all the fixins. And I'm just thinking, what it costs to get a bottled water at a Disney park these days?
Right. I ate at that commissary once. Here's my story. I don't think I put it in the book. So in 1988, I was a huge Disney fan. Eisner and Frank Wells, I thought, could do no wrong. I thought they were on the right track, blah, 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 blah. Still going to the Disney parks all the time, just loved everything they did. I didn't know how to get a job at Disney. I wanted to work for them, but also I wasn't living in Southern California. I was living in Northern California. In fact, I was living in San Francisco. So it's quite a commute back then, in the pre-internet days and everything like that. But my roommates' relatives lived in Southern California, and ironically, one of them worked as the secretary to Frank Wells. So she and I spoke on the phone, and she says, "Well, I will do an informational interview with you," which means, if you don't know, it's an interview, but it's not for any position. I'll just interview you.
Just to get a
And I
feel.
can't guarantee anything. And I said, I don't care. I'm going to be on the Disney lot. So, because you can't just walk on the Disney lot, especially back then. Probably now too. I don't even know. But anyway, so she took me around. Michael Eisner was not in-house, but Frank Wells was. So I did meet him. And we sat down, did like, a standard interview. It's just, what is your experience? I worked in a bookstore at the time. That was about it. In college, that was about it. And she goes, "Well, we'll keep you in mind if you move down to the Southern California area," which I had no plans to at that time. In fact, I've never been back as to live. But look me up. Maybe we can find something for you. And I was like, "Oh, that was nice," but I didn't really pursue it beyond that. But the cool part was, after the interview, she said, "You have that pass. You can stay here all day. Just stay out of trouble." But no, so if you've seen a reluctant dragon, I'm going. Anyway, stay out of trouble, but you can go anywhere you want. I go, cool. So you gotta remember, in 1988, they had not torn down the Zorro set or any of the other sets for the parking garage yet. And so I was walking around on that. I wish I had a camera, but it wasn't in the days where I even thought about having a camera, and nobody had cell phones back then. It's like, but I walked around on those sets. They're just all deserted and everything, but nobody cared. If I saw somebody, they waved hi. They were all friendly and everything. I knew Disney Archives was on the lot, so I went in there. Dave Smith was there, and he goes, "Can I help you?" And I go, and I didn't know what to say. I said, "I'm interested in looking at the early issues of Disney News." And he goes, "Oh, we got them right there on the shelf. Pull off the binder and start looking at them." So I pulled it off. There it was, very first issue, mint condition, just flipping through it. And it's like, just going through the first few years of it and everything like that. I stayed there for a couple hours. Well, before that, to connect with what you said, she said, "Well, I'll buy you lunch." And we sat in the commissary. Strangely enough, nobody was there that day, so it was just me and her.
Nice.
But she says, "Order anything you want on the menu." I don't even remember what I ordered, but it wasn't too expensive from what I remember, but it didn't matter. It was comped anyway. And we sat there and ate, and then she went on her way. "I gotta get back to work, stay out of trouble, and I'll talk to you later." And since I was dressed in a suit, I looked like I was supposed to be there, and I just kind of hobnobbed. I didn't really go into the animation department, but I think at that point it wasn't there anymore, if I remember correctly. We're talking 1988. I think they had moved them off site, which was really bizarre. So, um, and they hadn't had the real big comeback yet of Little Mermaid, so it was kind of like, do I really want
It was
to
the
see
era
the
of Oliver and Company, one of my favorites.
Yeah, but I don't think, I think if I remember correctly, and it says it on one of the documentaries that's on Disney Plus, is I think they moved him. Eisner was really weird. They moved him like 30 miles away in some smallish building around that time. I think later they came back in a nice refurbished animation building, but that brief time that I went there, yeah, they weren't on the lot, which is really strange. I think, yeah, they probably changed their mind once they started having hits, with Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast. They go, "Hey, come back here," but so that was just a weirdness at that time. So that was my experience. I bought a jacket which said Walt Disney Studios. I think I still have it, but unfortunately, it wasn't made very well, and it's kind of rotted, and
No.
it's kind of unfortunate, and it's also too small. But I hated that it rotted. It's like, oh geez, you didn't even make this that well, and I paid quite a bit for it. It seemed like I paid like $50 for it, back in 1988. So that was, pretty pricey. Anyway, so that was my experience on that.
That's an incredible experience. And also you just prompted me to, post another one here. One of my all-time favorite
Oh yeah.
books, Disney A to Z by the legendary Dave Smith. And he was another one who I was fortunate enough to be friends with on Facebook up until his death.
Mhm.
And there was times where I would send him a message, just about some interesting stuff, trivia, background stuff from some old 1974 film, and he'd respond right back saying, "Oh yeah, let me tell you a little bit about
Yeah.
that."
He was always good about responding.
It
That's what
was
was great
such a
about him.
wealth of information, because my first exposure to him was when Disney Magazine came out in the mid 90s, and he had a column in there simply called Ask Dave. And what I did not know was, and again, I wasn't a subscriber to the Disney Channel until it became a free non-pay basic cable package thing in 1999. But in Disney Channel Magazine, which I have a couple back issues for, he had a column in there as well
Yep.
when they first started publishing in the year they premiered in 1983.
Yeah. I never had Disney Channel, but I did get a few of those issues. I really wanted cable at that point, but where I lived at the time actually didn't have cable,
Oh wow.
so, which is my parents' house. And they, well, by 93, I was out on my own and I did have cable. But in the 80s, when it debuted in 83, we did not have cable. And I said, "Can't we get cable up here?" And they go, "They haven't run any lines up here." And I wanted it because there was MTV and there was Disney Channel and there was HBO was showing movies and nudity and everything else, and, it's like, sorry, son. So I'd have to go to friends' houses, or if we ever went to a hotel, I'd quickly flip it over to the Disney Channel and stuff like that. I know full well if I had Disney Channel back then, I would have taped everything.
Oh,
It's like,
same, same,
and now
absolutely.
it's just frustrating because they showed all the good stuff then that should be on Disney Plus now, but
Yeah.
that's where we came in. Anyway, um, and I always, like have had to resort to bootlegs, thanks Disney, for things like shows like Disneyland Showtime. I don't know if you know that one.
I
That's
know that one with
okay.
Kurt Russell and the
Yep.
Osmond brothers and
Yeah.
EJ Peeker.
Yeah. And more importantly, it's the premiere of the Haunted Mansion ride.
Yep.
So, and that was the reason I wanted a copy of that. And it's like, somebody said, "Oh yeah, I taped it off of Disney Channel. Here it is. You want to buy it?" Oh, sure. So I have it.
That's pretty much how I got the
Uh,
Herbie the Love Bug TV series, which would
yeah,
rerun in the late 80s and mid 90s on the Disney Channel.
yeah. Like the one I would love, my holy grail, and I mentioned it many times. I've mentioned it on here before when I was talking to various people. Like I talked to Steve Stanchfield, who runs Thunderbean Animation. I said, "Do you?" He reissues old like 30s and 40s cartoons. I said, "Would you be interested if it fell in your lap to reissue something more recent?" And he goes, "Sure. What are you talking about?" And we started talking about the Mouse Factory, and it's like, I'd love to put that out, but Disney would probably never do it. But again, that's this thing, where I have a few select episodes because I have collectors that have copies of them on 16 millimeter and they put them on DVD and say, "Here, Mark." And so I have like 5 episodes, but there's like 43 of them, so it's like it's a long way, and they're all kind of faded and stuff like that. And I know Disney probably has pristine prints sitting in their vaults, and they just don't care because it wasn't done by Walt and it wasn't done by Eisner or whatever. I don't know what their thinking is, so it's a natural to me to stream it on Disney Plus, but that's me.
They need to have just a whole section. It's like the Ron Miller collection.
Yes. Ron Miller, we hate that guy. It's like, anyway. Um, Now, if you don't mind me asking, when were you born?
1983, July
Oh,
20th
okay.
to be.
So,
In fact, next week's my 39th birthday.
all right. So you have a little bit of connection to the original Disney, barely, but I was just wondering, what films you grew up with. So when you were watching Love Bug in your crib, what was going on at that time? So, yeah. Uh, because for me, like I said, when Eisner and Wells took over, I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. But I hate to say it, and you held up the film, and I said, thumbs up. But part of me makes me cringe. Is I think Dick Tracy is where he kind of went a little too far, not because of the film itself, but at the time, and you can look it up if you do your little history, is Michael Eisner thought this was going to be the big hit of all time for Disney, which I thought, this is crazy. It's not even their character. And they had all these theme park rides and sequel movies and TV series and everything else set up for the Dick Tracy decade. And it's like, no, please. Fortunately, the film was kind of a flop, so we didn't have to worry about that. But, it's like, I was like, that was the first I was like, okay, he's lost his way. I don't like
He,
this Eisner guy as much as I once did.
he did see it as being the Disney Studios answer to the summer of '89 with Batman.
Yeah. It's like, no.
I know the history of it enough to be fully aware of what you're throwing out there, but it's just one of those. I personally love it for the colors and
Yeah.
the music and the cinematography, and yeah, I mean, I'm well aware of
And Dick Van Dyke's in it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he plays a creep, District Attorney Fletcher.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, it was very envelope pushing at the time. And at the time, I remember going to the then new MGM Studios in Orlando, and it was like Dick Tracy everywhere. This was like
Yeah.
a month before the film even came out. They had an attraction as part of the backlot tour. They had an actual stage show where the Beauty and the Beast show ended up performing for many years,
Mhm.
merchandise left and right. And yeah, I mean, Unfortunately, it was not a hit, and Warren Beatty on record has stated he owns the director's cut that he originally was going to try and get put on the laser disc of the film when it was released, and Disney just said no, they weren't interested. We're going to do it our way. And I'm still hoping before he dies, if he's able to work some kind of deal out where the director's cut will be released.
So the version you have, since I don't have any version of it, the Blu-ray that you held up is just the standard theatrical
Yes,
edition that's always been
it's
out.
what it's always been on any
Okay.
release, whether it
Okay.
was DVD, VHS, Laserdisc. This is nothing more than what people saw in theaters in 1990.
Okay. Because that's the only time I saw it. I was unfortunately underwhelmed, and I don't think I've seen it since. So, but I did appreciate the colors. I did an episode of this podcast with Mike Curtis and another one with Joe Staton, who are both the artist and writer of the current version of Dick Tracy comic strip. And I asked Mike Curtis, I said, "So, what do you think of the Dick Tracy film that Warren Beatty did?" And all he could say was, "No comment." And I can see why. I can say it because I'm not affiliated, but he's writing for the Dick Tracy comic strip, and it really is a lot. That film is really a lot of the reason why a lot of other Dick Tracy projects can't get started, because there's something in there that Warren Beatty actually has part ownership of the character, which is really bizarre why Disney would have signed that and agreed to that. But it's keeping that's why there's no Dick Tracy comics. There is a comic, but that's why there's no TV show, no other movies, like a reboot to just start over again with some other cast, some other people, anything, and it's for hardcore Dick Tracy fans, of which Mike and Joe are and were. It's just like we can't see anything else, and you have to go back to watching Dick Tracy versus Cue Ball and all those old 40s cheesy flicks, and the 1960s cartoon series and things like that, and that's where it kind of stops. Yeah. So thanks to Warren, anyway, and Disney, their wonderful agreement, but maybe it'll come out. But I think that's kind of where Disney lost its way, which was part of the reason why I ended my book there, because also because going back to Leonard Maltin's original Disney film, his original book was, I don't know if you ever seen the original version he put out in 1973.
I had gotten it out numerous times from my local library back in Delaware. So yeah, I remember the original version.
Yeah. So the original version, he's a little bit harsher and more critical of some of those Disney films. In subsequent revisions, he's kind of softened his stance on certain things that he basically said were utter crap, which is his prerogative. But it kind of made it a little more kind of saccharine and kind of wishy-washy and everything like that. Now, I admit, I'm not sitting there massacring Disney films left and right in my book either, but I figure I'm kind of reporting on the films. Your mileage may vary if you watch these films, but I think I put a few choice things in here and there. But for me and the experiences of watching all the Disney films over the years is when there's a surprise of a film that's actually really, really good and like total flop, like The Littlest Horse Thieves comes to mind, if you've ever seen that.
Never seen that one.
Yeah. It's not like your typical Disney film. It has a different title. I'll look it up, but you could look it up too in England and Australia, where it also came out. It's one of the Disney kind of British type films.
Oh yeah, I remember now. You're right. It does have an alternate title because Anchor Bay released that one.
Yeah, that was one of them, and that's where I saw it the first time, and I said, "Wow, this is incredibly good." I was shocked, And if you're a fan of The Christmas Carol from 1951, I believe Alistair Sim plays the old man in that. He wasn't really an old man in the original The Christmas Carol from '51, but by the time Ride a Wild Pony came out, I'm mixing up my films. The Little Horse Thieves came out. He was an old man, but if you're a fan of that film, you'd probably like this film too. So anyway. So just a little trivia here and there. So
Nice.
so apart from enjoying and liking Disney films, do you do anything else of import, like write books, podcasts, or do anything else, or are you just
Yeah,
a big fan?
I'll do a little self-promotion here.
Okay.
So I had been doing something for a while on YouTube called Phil's Flicks, and I spelled Flicks Phlicks, and it was basically feature-length audio commentaries that I had recorded over some of my favorite films.
Hmm.
And as of now, I've only done 4 episodes. I did one for A Christmas Story. I did one for Police Academy, the original Ghostbusters, and Flight of the Navigator.
Okay.
So basically, as you start these films on whatever medium you're watching, you can load up YouTube on like your phone or your computer and listen to me explaining, some interesting trivia about the film as you watch it.
Hmm.
Another thing I've recently gotten into doing is, this ties in with the Christmas Story. I've always believed the creator of Christmas Story, Gene Shepard, to be what I consider the great American storyteller.
Hmm.
So what I've started doing is actually audiobook recordings of myself doing his anthology, his first anthology, which was called In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash.
Right.
So what I've been doing is just kind of doing, little chapter recordings weekly and uploading them to my YouTube page. And I'm hoping to do more of that while I'm on vacation anyway for the next couple days. But other than that, I'll tell you, I have had quite an interesting life working in the industry a little bit. Doing radio in college, I graduated with a bachelor's degree in communications journalism, and I actually worked in Las Vegas radio for a few years doing traffic reports.
Cool.
Then I actually went over to the MGM Grand and worked at a place owned by CBS called Television City, where you can watch and review new pilot television shows that may or may not make it to the CBS-owned stations, including CBS itself, Showtime. Sometimes we got Nickelodeon shows, and sometimes a show for the CW. So you could basically gather guests from the hotel to have a free pass to watch the show, give their feedback. Some of the shows made it, some of them don't. Some of the shows you may know that actually made it. 2.5 Men, The Big Bang Theory, Mike and Molly, all the CSIs and NCIS
All Chuck
shows.
Lorre shows.
Yep. The Good Wife with Juliana Margulies.
Hmm.
That was one we tested. But as it stands now, I actually work in the Las Vegas law enforcement area of Metro. I work as what's called a LEST, a law enforcement support technician, basically helping citizens for various items, be it getting a work card to work a certain job or passing out, permits for concealed carrying weapons, basically. But I still have a love for cinema. Actually, this is one thing I didn't get to tell you at the very start of this, and I'll tell you now. Most children, when they're 3 years old, learn how to ride a tricycle.
Hmm.
I learned how to work a VCR. From constant putting in tapes, we didn't have a top loader. We just had a real, just slide it in and hit play. Just endless Fridays, movie day, with my mom taking me to a local video store that basically I would rent endless amounts of the classic white clamshell Disney live action or animated movies. And something I even pointed out recently to someone, I said, hey, do you notice that with Disney movies on DVD, they all come in white cases? Yes. They said, do you know why that is? Because they're trying to replicate the way they looked on VHS back in the 80s and 90s, because they stand out. If your kid goes to a video store and wants to get a Disney film, they just look for the white case.
Right. I think they do a lot of children's movies in general, though. But yeah, definitely Disney. So
yeah,
except for the Anchor Bay ones.
Yeah, those were like I said, with Watcher in the Woods. Yeah, that one had a black case.
Actually, there's a couple funny ones that this one I kept because I met Ronnie Shell, who was the voice of Jake.
I met Ronnie Shell too.
Yeah, and he was briefly in the film, dubbed, which is funny. If you've seen him in the film, his voice is dubbed when he's himself, because they didn't want kids to be confused. But I have, there it is. So is yours in a black case, or is yours in like a bluish case? Mine is kind of bluish.
It is a black case, but I know what
Okay.
you're talking about
Yeah,
because when I
there's, and
first
then I
saw
think
these,
I have,
yeah, they had
yeah,
different color. They had a blue one for Cat from Outer Space and a purple one for North Avenue Irregulars. And I think they had like I want to say a gold bronze one for like Candle Shoe.
I think so. The one I remember also is they had kind of a magenta burgundy
For
one
Black
or whatever.
Hole.
Not well, Black Hole, but also for Napoleon and Samantha of all
Napoleon
things.
and Samantha. Wow.
So yeah, they did odd things over there at Anchor Bay, but it's like
I'd
I
love to
try.
talk to the people who decided what titles they wanted to get from Disney.
Well,
Unless
I know a
someone at Disney
little.
was just like, well, we'll lease out these 15 titles. No one cares
Yeah,
about
well,
these.
my thought was, and I don't know this for sure, but just because I went through the whole era of Disney from 8 millimeter film through the eh, put it this way, I've said this before. You may not have heard this. I might have put it in the book, but I don't know if I did. A format is not going to survive until Disney embraces it.
That's a good
And
point.
because Disney was very reluctant, very, very, very reluctant to put anything on home video. Now they would have 16 millimeter film excerpts
That you could
galore,
rent.
those are fine. But and you could rent their feature films if you wanted to. You had to pay a little bit for private exhibition if you
Yeah.
wanted to, but that's a whole nother
For
story. But
showing in
as
school.
far as when they went to home video, um, they were very, very hesitant to do it. Um, I think the first animated ones they put out, and they did these on purpose because they had been on TV, is they put out Dumbo and Alice in Wonderland. Those had both been on television, so they figure, well, if we're going to put out anything, let's put out something people might have already recorded off the air, which I did have a copy of Dumbo recorded off the air, so they were correct about that. Um, then they kind of tested the waters. Let's test it with one of our kind of unsuccessful films, which there are lovers of this film, but it's not one of their biggest hits, is Robin Hood. I mean, it did well, but it's not like Lion King or, you know, Pixar well, whatever, you know. And they go, that did reasonably well. Okay, let's try classic. And then they put out Pinocchio. But
Pinocchio.
they also put these things out and all studios did this. It wasn't just Disney. They put them out at crazy prices, like $100 a tape. So they're kind of forcing people to rent these things versus buying them outright. So it took me a while to actually start buying them. And what my dad and I would do is we would copy them off of existing tapes because my dad, he was always a computer whiz. He would figure out how to bypass all the Disney mumbo jumbo that kept you from making bootleg copies and stuff like that.
Nice.
And then when I started getting money in, the prices, like they dropped Pinocchio down to like $30 or something. Then I said, all right, I'll start buying these. And then they would start going out of print. And it's like, anyway, to
It's your
answer your
last
question,
chance to own
yeah,
this.
yeah. So like I remember Lady and the Tramp on VHS was trading for like $200 at one point because it was out of print thanks to Peggy Lee's lawsuit and stuff like that. And now it's like common. You can see it on Disney Plus, it's on DVD, it's on Blu-ray, it's like whatever. But it's just funny that there's that one little window there, $200 if you want it, and it's like, and I had a friend of mine who wanted me to give it to him to copy it. I would have never seen it again if I gave it to him. You can have it now. Yeah, anyway.
You're
Uh,
bringing up an interesting flashback memory to me. I used to, whenever Disney would actually sell these videotapes, they had these little mini catalogs in the cassette tape
yeah,
case that showcased what you could order if
yeah,
you worked in a video store. And just the prices on some of these just blew my mind. And one of them in particular, I'll never forget, when Tron came out. Tron as a VHS retailed at like $98.99 in 1984.
yeah.
And I thought to myself, who's going to pay that for a videotape of Tron? And I have to remember, well, this is meant for like video store
Yeah,
retailers
yeah,
to order 1 or 2 copies of Max.
right. And ironically, I think it was Disney who finally said, let's put like I don't know which one was first. Might have been Little Mermaid or something. Let's put it at a sell-through price, and they sold it for like $20 or something. And of course, it sold a bazillion copies because there was like, wow, that's cheap, you know. But going back to Anchor Bay, my thought on Anchor Bay, but I don't have this proven. It's just because of my own going through it all.
Sure.
Is that when DVDs came out, Disney again was very skeptical. They were not quick into doing it. The only one they put out, I think, was Mary Poppins, and they probably kind of looked at their catalog and said, "Well, this one sold well. This one." So Anchor Bay wants to license some of these out. We're certainly not going to give them any of our animated films. But let's see which ones sold lousy on VHS. Oh, probably these 20. Let's give them those. And that's why those ended up. And Black Hole probably was one of them that sold badly, you know, or they gave them a few bones. They say, "Oh, okay, you know, here you can have Black Hole." That's kind of like, you know, but they didn't pick the pristine, like they didn't get Apple Dumpling Gang, they didn't get the Love Bug, they, you know, they always got like the also rans, kind of almost made it, you know, they got the Happiest Millionaire
Yeah, I was going to
versus
say
Mary
that Happiest
Poppins, which,
Millionaire,
yeah,
ironically, again, you're talking about like lack of bonus features, and yet Disney managed to license to them the extended roadshow
yeah,
edition.
yeah. Now, I always think it's because Anchor Bay probably asked for it, and they said, "Okay, I guess so. Why not?" You know, not thinking.
It's
But
getting good play on the Disney Channel.
at this point, I don't think Disney would ever license out anything to another
Oh,
label
never again. No.
because there's money to be made, and it's best to kind of keep stuff in the vault if they're not sure about
Yeah.
something, which
No,
is
I
unfortunate.
mentioned that in an email to a podcast called the Medfield College Film Society. I had, yeah, that's their actual name. And I wrote to them, I asked them if they had heard about this Anchor Bay situation with DVDs in the late 90s with Disney titles. And I said, you know, the funny thing is once they realized just how much, you know, people wanted the demand for more and more Disney on DVD, that's when like, okay, light bulb going off here. All right, we got to put Toy Story 2 on DVD right away. We got to put Tarzan. We got to put Mulan, all these new animated films. And then let's get all those old live action films and rush them to DVD, but no bonuses, just the bare bones widescreen
Right.
film, if that.
Yeah.
I
And they
just actually, it's funny. I just started watching. I got this out of the library, if you can believe this one. This is a very forgotten Disney film, but of his era, Bon Voyage.
oh
I
yeah.
actually started watching this one because I remember finding it on VHS at
Yeah.
a video store back in the 90s. And as a kid, I did not like it. And I thought, you know,
Yeah.
this is, believe it or not, and I had to research this just before we started the podcast. I discovered that Bon Voyage at that time was the longest live action Disney film made, surpassing 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yeah.
It runs just
And if it isn't,
a
it
shade
seems,
over 2
if
hours.
it isn't, it seems like
Yeah.
it's not one of their best. I mean, I don't know. Do you know animation historian Jerry Beck?
What's that?
Jerry Beck, do you know of him?
Mm-mm.
He's done various commentaries and stuff like that. He's
Okay.
into animation more than anything else. But we were having a discussion again on this very podcast of just films, and he's 10 years older than me. So he grew up with a lot of these stuff first run, like Bon Voyage. And he would see a lot of Disney things first run. But, you know, there were certain ones that just were like, this isn't what was advertised. This is awful, you know, and that was one of them, Bon Voyage. Lieutenant Robin Crusoe, we mentioned. Another one was Moon Pilot. He was
Moon
looking really
Pilot.
forward to
Ugh.
it, and it's like it's painful to watch. You know, the only thing worthy of watching Moon Pilot for is you can catch an early, probably the first appearance of Joanne Worley in a film. So it's like pre-Laugh-In, pre-Mad Show, pre-everything. You know,
Moon
but
Pilot is one of those oddballs where I'll never forget this because I'm sure it's still there. At the Disney All-Star Movies Resort, they have buildings dedicated to 5 different Disney films: Toy Story, The Mighty Ducks, 101 Dalmatians, Fantasia, and The Love Bug. Well, all of those films have their own respective movie posters in the food court, except The Love Bug, and in substitution for that is a poster of Moon Pilot.
I guess I couldn't find the Love Bug poster that day. I don't know.
And I'm looking at this like, what the hell is this doing up on the wall. I wanted to be like, can I talk to someone? God, this needs to be taken down. I have a Love Bug poster. I will donate gladly for this.
Mm. No. They had a couple spares sitting around. Hey, let's slap up this Moon 5 poster. I don't know. But yeah. So, probably those three are very painful if I ever had to watch them again, but, I probably will at some point. Just say, I think, like if they, again, put them on Disney Plus, I probably would watch them again just to see how they've improved on them. Because one thing I will say, when they ever do put something new up, or when they've ever put, it looks pristine. Like, I always remember Treasure Island being kind of muddy and murky and hard to see. Nope, nice and clear, like it was shot today. It's like, wow, I don't know what they did, if they found their negative or just decided to redo it. Another one that was that way, Swiss Family Robinson, looks incredible. I've watched all of them.
Well, you can also thank Ken Anakin for that one.
Mm-hmm. And in recent vintage, which is not on Disney Plus, but it is on a cheap Blu-ray, the Robin Williams Popeye movie. If you don't have that, I mean, it's like,
I do have that.
I always found that movie to be kind of muddy and murky. Not my favorite film. It's still not my favorite film, but it looks fantastic now. And just because it looks fantastic, it's actually improved my viewing pleasure a zillion times, that I've actually watched it a few times on Blu-ray, because I said, wow, this looks great, instead of like all muddy and murky, like the way things looked in 1980, because they're trying to be realistic or some crazy thing. I don't know what they were trying to do back then, but yeah. Anyway, I don't have much more to say. We can. I was going to say,
if at this point you want to wrap up, with any additional questions. Well, I mean, I actually had one for you, because we had mentioned Dick Van Dyke earlier, because if you think about it, not counting Dick Tracy, which is technically really more of a cameo, really the only other films he did for Disney after Mary Poppins were Lieutenant Robin Crusoe USN and Never a Dull Moment. What do you think of Never a Dull Moment?
Better than Lieutenant Robin Crusoe USN.
Agreed.
Interesting actors in it. I like Edward G. Robinson in it. It's not the best film, but it's not the worst either. I mean, when I had to rewatch it for my book, it was an enjoyable experience. I was like, I was surprised. I think in general, I have a problem with just how Dick Van Dyke was acting, not personally, but as an actor during that time. I think he was trying to get away from silly roles and trying to be more serious for some reason. Like, if you've seen other movies, non-Disney movies that he did around that vintage, like The Comic and stuff like that.
Love The Comic.
Not really funny though. I mean, it's like, it's more serious, and he was trying to be taken as a serious dramatic actor, and I don't think that quite worked. I'm not saying he isn't capable of doing serious work. It's just, I think he was doing, like, I always felt that, like, The Comic should have been a funnier film considering its title, and it was kind of a little more serious to downright depressing even. And that's, now some people, probably yourself, love it for that. Me, I find it kind of difficult to watch, because I was wanting just Dick Van Dyke acting silly, doing his Stan Laurel impersonation or whatever, but hey, to each his own. So I've had a love-hate relationship with Dick Van Dyke, and more of it has to do with what he was kind of going through at that time. And I think he was trying to take himself a little more seriously. By the mid-70s, he kind of just said, Carl Reiner came back with the new Dick Van Dyke show, and he kind of threw up his arms and he says, screw it, I'm a comedian. It's like, and he never looked back, because I think even Diagnosis Murder, even though it had like serious elements to it, it was still kind of more like The Love Boat, or what we're saying, all these Disney movies, have, aging celebrity of the week making a cameo with Dick and Barry Van Dyke, so, and even still later, you go to the Night at the Museum movies, and, Dick Van Dyke's just kind of playing Dick. It's like, here I am, I know I'm old and I'm happy, and I'm, and, in the recent Mary Poppins movie, it's like everything, he's kind of done kind of these lighthearted things, saying, I should embrace Mary Poppins. I should embrace Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I should embrace the stuff that people come up to me and profess that they love, and I kind of dismissed as garbage, or kitty fodder or whatever people did, you know.
Yeah.
But also society changed too, because there
Oh, yeah.
is, even though people malign these Disney films, I think they malign them less now than they did probably when they were made. Because I remember when seeing these in the 70s, even though I was a kid still, it's just like, you really want to see that? It's like, why don't you see this like good film like Jaws or something like that?
The same with my
Well,
mom trying to push the Goonies onto me.
because Jaws is kind of scary and the shark eats people. Now, eventually I did see Jaws, but when it first came out, I didn't want to have anything to do with it. I was like 9 years old, and I was like, why don't you see more adult stuff like The Exorcist? No thanks. Or The Omen? No thanks. So later, I ended up seeing all that stuff and more, and enjoy it. But um, so any other questions before we wrap?
I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, I think I've exhausted all of mine.
All right. Well, we can always do this again sometime if
I
we
look
want.
forward to this. This is the first podcast I've ever been a guest on, so I
Very good.
appreciate the invite.
I like the idea that you're doing commentaries. If you ever want to do a dual commentary for, say, one of the Disney films, say like Strongest Man in the World, that's my
Absolutely.
favorite. I would love to do that.
Absolutely.
It's like I'd have to kind of come up with various facts and everything like that. But
It
see
would
if I
be a
can
pleasure.
talk for 90 minutes about a film, while I'm watching it. That'd be interesting. I
Like
don't know.
the one constant, I think even you mentioned this in the book, and I had to rewatch it to really understand. And I was like, man, he's right. This is not Kurt Russell's movie. This is Michael McGreevy's movie. This is Skylar's movie.
Yeah. And I always wondered if they would have done a fourth one, but I doubt it once Joe Flynn died. But and he died even before they released it. But
Yeah.
I think Kurt Russell was really getting tired of doing it, but he had that long contract, and I think that was his last one.
Yeah.
Then he finally graduated to doing Used Cars, which is a great film. And this
And
is Elvis.
of course escaped from New York.
Yeah. So he became a good actor. Yes. So and he did come back to Disney from time to time after that. So
Sky High.
Yeah. So anyway, we could talk another hour about him, but my voice is giving out, and I gave my water to my dog, so I'm not going to drink it and watch
I've
you.
got a pizza waiting for me.
All right, so well, I thank you, Phil, for being my special guest to talking
thank
Disney.
You, Mark.
We must do it again sometime. Something
Absolutely.
else, we can talk something specific on Disney or even other films. So anyway, thank you very much, and that wraps up another episode of the Fun Ideas Podcast.